Welcome back to my channel, everybody. Today is April 27th, 2024, and if only you knew how many times I had to play that intro to get to this point, you would understand how frustrating it can be to try to do something over and over without succeeding. You know, but in those cases of refinement, of failure, refinement, as we can currently call it going forward, we can recognize one another and understand clearly what we are communicating about. No matter what countries we visited in the past, whether or not we actually take time to know our own neighbors, we actually know one another very well, well enough that if we were in need, we would appreciate it if we were able to reciprocate the help that we generally would give to one another along this precious journey called life. Today, I'm playing a song on a Dean Valor, formerly known as the Dean Mako, and on it is a flag. And that flag is tattered, and you can see the machinery behind the flag. Well, today, walking outside of this very door, in this house that I was entrusted to be the steward over, we found that there was the sound of running water, and it was coming from between this house and the next house. And it turns out that the faucet was on for the outside spigot for our neighbors. And I wanted to make sure I was allowed the opportunity to tend to their area. So I called as I was proceeding to move through their back gate, which was not locked, which I only know because it wasn't secured the other day. But anyway, this time there was a brick in front of the gate, and I was calling the neighbors to make sure if I went into their yard, I wouldn't be caught off guard, and that they wouldn't be caught off guard. Because as we know in the news today, some people can walk into someone else's yard and be shot for going to the wrong address. That's the tattered flag that is before you, probably in your nation as well. Words are powerful. Music is powerful. Where we go to be inspired for the ability to bring joy to one another, we don't have to travel very far to know how to do that. And so, after proceeding from this situation where there was gushing water, imagine gushing water in some places, what it means. Torrential downpours. Could be the matter of difference between life and death if someone had water to begin with. Imagine that there's this indifference to the gushing water. There's an indifference to one another where we might get shot even for helping one another. But thankfully I have great neighbors, and so conversation went pretty pleasantly. And I was granted permission to do what I was already going to do, which was helping my neighbor. I just was taking the actions actively. And so, crisis averted, we were all still left wondering, how did that water get turned on behind a closed fence that was basically secured in a way where you had to move a brick to get into the fence, into the through the fence door? How did that happen? Mysterious. Either way, it was an opportunity to help. It is tied into the day that I'm having so far, and it's all relevant to you because you're listening to figure out, why are these topics resonating with me? How is it that I can hear what this guy is saying and understand he's talking to me? Well, it's because I am. I'm talking with you. But I'm telling you my story. I would love to hear your story, by the way. If you have a story that you can share, please place it in the comments link so we can review it. In the meanwhile, my story is, went on for a walk and met with some other neighbor down the street who was walking their dogs And then they started communicating about how a certain country was causing all of these things. The letter started with A. I'll leave it as ambiguous as that. And then the communication being received from my perspective, from the gentleman with whom I was communicating, a gentleman who has served our nation, by the way, and who is a very kind and considerate person, was telling me in terms that made me feel like it was an ethnic divide. And the reason I can feel that is because generally anyone with whom I've spoken who has a really strong feeling towards any ethnicity has a feeling like that for many things and many other ethnicities, perhaps excluding only their own, sometimes including even their own. That judgmental part that you're listening with right now to hear my story and why it sounds like I'm talking with you is because I'm telling you we are in dire circumstances. The same gentleman who was talking with me in a way that made me feel a little bit funny inside also was telling me that he saw in the news there were 27 tornadoes last night. I don't know if you heard that little tapping sound, but sometimes I hear things and I'll call them confirmations, like a sign from the Lord saying we shall help one another if only we can understand that we're on the same mission together. I've put in the description here a few different ways of communicating with me, at least. If you're too subconsciously thinking about the self to be able to post something in public that makes sense. And I do that because I know a lot of us are wanting to help one another. Well, let me tell you, from my perspective, as this world comes to its conclusion and as those nights filled with terror continue to occur, I heard about something beautiful that's about to occur. It's the synchronized flashing of the lightning bugs that happens in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And that happens, I don't know how many times a year. I would assume this one time. I don't know how many seasons these bugs do this, but I do know that the national park holds a lottery, which expires today, where I could have registered to go to see such an event. And I may still register for this. But monetarily, it is pretty difficult among these challenges to make a reasonable income that doesn't continue to dishonor our fathers. So when I talk about these topics, I don't talk about them so that we can just sit there and spin our wheels, trying to figure out where we can travel to learn about ourselves. Ourselves is ourselves, everybody inclusive. And it's hard to include one another when we don't even take the time to remember anything about one another. That usually occurs because we're too distracted to even hear somebody telling a story without wanting to interject. Yes, we are all going through challenges in a great multitude of ways. It's because we never stop to see the wake that we're leaving. Imagine even me getting to see these flashing lightning bugs, as beautiful as vision that would be to me. As much as I could long to have had parents that had a fortune to bestow upon me so I could do what some other people do, and yet I'm not jealous about it. I'm just telling you from a perspective. I wonder if the people who have had it more easy can ever look at the people who are not having as easy of a time making these decisions because of monetized reasons. So, whether we understand how to help one another or not, my monetary forecast is that if I had never worried, if I were truly free, just like most of us would wish to be, somewhere in the universe, this message itself would resonate in just a way that caused a sudden ability for us to put more energy into paying attention to the things that bring us joy. Last night, I shared a video of a wasp shaking its tail, its stinger, shaking its moneymaker. And I made a little nifty rhyme because it came to my mind when I saw this video, when I watched it myself. I thought, I bet other people think just like me. They're creative. They think it's fun. The only difference of how we like or dislike something is if we like or dislike the presenter or even the presented material. And because the wasp was an anonymous wasp doing its garden thing, I figured the wasp alone didn't get it all the dislikes that it got. It's dislikes that come to me in the form of me saying, hey, well, Mr. So-and-so, it isn't those people in the country whose letter begins with the letter A who are the cause of any of the dismal situations that we are likely to encounter today itself when it comes to bigotry. In some cases, when we look at the mirror, we don't understand because we don't want to. That's cowardice. Cowardice is brought about right directly from fear. Fear either causes you to do something right or to cover it up. I don't know if many of you know that I have 2 channels, but sometimes I'll put the same video on both channels and get different responses. It's very interesting. So behind the flag, there is this machinery. The machinery can only be maintained for as long as there are resources to deal with such tremendous resource requests. And so I, alongside everybody else who's out there, recognize that sometimes we have continued to consume without even considering. Is it excess? Is it excess for me to want to see the fireflies? Is it excess for me to have a guitar that presents a complete picture so that I can translate it and have it be translated in every language so that we can recognize love is universal? With all of that being said, thank you so much for visiting my channel, for subscribing, for initiating communications. Even if and when we recognize, hey, there are new ways to communicate where we can do it more effectively. And perhaps the algorithm can look beyond some of its current limitations and find a way to help fund the projects that matter. Or we can keep gambling it away for no reason on resources that are not sustainable. That's just my take, and that's why I understand that I pressed a few more buttons than I intended to. I apologize for causing any kind of anxiety type related recognitions and for causing the uneasiness, if that's what I caused. I would like to continue the conversation. You can see when I play my music, there are things that don't come out as smoothly as they should right now, as smoothly as they could, because I'm agitated from having a morning where there's gushing water coming out so close, flooding the yard, where there's people talking about things that are almost sounding like as if anti-bigotry type statements, but it's really just bigotry. And that kind of stuff does cause a level of awareness, because if that's how I participated and that's who I loved, well, I still love that person. I still love my neighbors. And that's why I would want to help for every interaction to be recognized for what it is. We didn't see these things that we saw every day because of an accident. We chose it. So if anyone is upset at me for presenting in a way that causes supposed fear, well, I'm unafraid. I'm unafraid because I've been in this side of the mix for a long time, where things don't seem to make sense, where I don't seem to have those same deep friendships, even though I know I do, where I don't seem to have the same family, even though I know, I guarantee you, my family is watching. And even though I don't know, because I wasn't theoretically there, unless I can remember some past person's lives, from their account, from their honest account. Even then, without having seen something directly, I can't hardly tell you, is Tupac still alive? Is Elvis still alive? Should those questions make anyone angry? Are we all still children of the same creator? Or are we so hostile that anything that we grew in love will fall apart and be divided in half, whether it was still breathing or not? All of this makes sense to everyone out there because it's the spirit of truth. So thank you so much for tuning in for the truth. Everyone else who's staying silent in the sidelines, just don't get violent when it comes down to it. Use your words, play some music, communicate. I've said everything that I've encountered, and I'm not worried about the repercussion because we have the freedom to talk about these things, and I've said nothing that is immodest. It's only true. I hope that moves us all to consider that those additional tornadoes that we've been having during the winter are not exclusive to something that we are unable to participate in changing. Until next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff. Not much better, but not much worse. So that's about how well I can play that song. I don't even know the name of it well enough to spell it right, or even to know if what I'm going to type as the title of the song is the right song. I took one semester of classical guitar back in college, way back when, and out of all of my college experience, I can say that song is basically one of the main morsels of knowledge that I took away from the university experience. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying guitar has been at the top of my list for what I've wanted to study, participate in, learn. But even that has been a challenging thing, as you've seen if you've watched any of these videos. So with all of that being said, thank you one more time for tuning in and for sharing words of encouragement. I hope that I'm doing that for you. Thanks again.